Our guest Costa made $120,000 on a flip in Boston, but transitioned to wholesaling remotely in Kansas City. Find out why in this episode.
I mean, I've always been a big time book reader, and that was kind of popping around. I like to keep my TikTok to like more motivational stuff versus like just junk, and that's been pretty great. CG talks about it all the time. So,
man, I've never read. I read almost 10 pages every day. It's my goal, but I've never like walked away reading nonfiction and feeling bad. It always feels great, you know. But if you go into social media, there is stuff that does make you feel bad.
Yeah.
Or like you're not at that level, or.
I think I'm gonna start trying to read, like, I think what hangs me up sometimes is focusing too much on personal development. Like I have my 10 or 15 minutes in the morning in terms of reading, but then at night it's like 8:30, 9 o'clock. It's like, oh, what do I do? Just, you know, turn on the TV and go to bed. So like, I want to start working in at night, like a good, you know, like a, Marcus Luttrell book or something military based. I came out of the military, so.
You did come out of the military?
I did, yeah. I was in the Marine Corps. I was a captain in the Marine Corps.
Well, thank you for your service.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Honestly, the best education on leadership ever. And just at the time too, I was an operations officer. I ran a battalion of 650 Marines, like a ton of stress, but like a lot of it is self-induced, you know, where once you go through that stuff, you know, you look back and you're like, oh, it's not that bad. But the things that I learned, right, like time management, delegating, core concepts, the Marine Corps planning process is absolutely phenomenal. It's really helped, you know, in terms of building my business and, you know, in conjunction with reading, right, like Pareto's principle, 80-20, you know, focusing on the right things, has really been, you know, something that's great for me.
Yeah, that's like 80% of the wealth is held by 20% of the people. And
exactly.
You can kind of look in nature. It's probably, I don't know, randomly, like 80% of the cows are serviced by 20% of the bulls. I don't know.
Yeah.
Right? That's probably true.
20% of the stuff
like
we're doing in the 20% of the stuff in the business that we're doing is going to bring us 80% of the value.
Yeah.
Like don't right. It's so hard it's so easy to get lost in the sauce. Focus on, you know, shiny object syndrome, 80%. Just having the self-awareness to stop is like, all right, is this really going to bring me value right now or in the long term? So that's been huge.
Anything else in the way that the Marines plan? Do they have like a certain process that they go through? Yeah,
so they, you know, it starts with first, like, you know, when you're thinking of the commander's end state, right? Like you hear, even when we talk about now, what you want, right? And work backwards. So like, what is our end state that we desire? What are the conditions? You know, what resources do we need? What needs to happen in order to have this end situation, right? And then you look at, okay, what's our current assessment of, you know, our capabilities? How are we performing? How are we doing this? And then in terms of breaking down the business, right? Because the business obviously does more than one thing, right? Yeah, we are investors, but you know, we wholesale, we have employees, right? So like you kind of come up with your lines of effort as like kind of what we do, and then you come up with end states for those, and then you work backwards from there. That's been incredible.
Sounds kind of similar to first principles.
Maybe. I think it's, you know, what's amazing, what you find is like it's all kind of like, you know, I was getting my MBA for a little bit, and you see similarities of it there, right? Like it's, you know, the concepts, effective concepts are always the same, or they can be re-seen through other aspects of business or in life. I think another main one that I took from the Marine Corps is in war fighting. There's doctrine that they have, and it talks about like efficiency versus effectiveness, right? Like you can be 100% if you look at it on the scale, right? Like you can be 100% efficient in your spends low, but are you really that effective, right? So then on the effective side, yeah, I could spend a gazillion dollars, but I don't, and I could be totally effective, but the truth is I don't have that amount of resources, right? So like, I think in terms of being a good leader, building a good business, being able to balance efficiency and effectiveness and kind of having that in the back of your mind on, maximizing your resources, your personnel, and everything that you do, right? It's like, okay, should I spend X amount on mailers versus pay-per-click, right? Like just kind of what is the most effective response for what we're capable of doing.
One of the things you said was start with the end in mind. What was the big goal when you were starting your business?
I think when I got out of the Marine Corps, me and my partner Mike, we both didn't want to be normal, right? Like we wanted to break away from the normal, and not that anything's wrong with normal, right? But like I did the corporate life, I did the Marine Corps. The Marine Corps is amazing, right? But like I want to be able to live my own life on my terms, and what's the best way to do that, right? The easy answer is, well, most millionaires have something to do with real estate. Mm-hmm. We started there. At the time, Airbnbs were hot. We hopped on. We found one in a good market, did a map analysis, kind of, whatever. That worked out in terms of, what's the word? It takes the first step to walk a mile. We didn't know what we were doing. Did enough research. We were certainly making money, but the juice wasn't worth the squeeze. But like I was watching your podcast earlier where it was like, I didn't know what I was doing. Then I did one deal and like I started to familiarize myself with title work, right? And then I felt confident to do the next thing.
Yeah. I was really nervous about doing an off-market deal when I had never done a transaction. So I just, while I had the W-2, I bought a house through an agent that was like a retail deal. Mm-hmm. And I rented out all the bedrooms while living there. But at least having done that transaction was like, okay, now I know how this goes. I'll go off market now, no problem, because it's not as like scary. Sometimes just the unknown prevented me from taking action. So
yeah, it's just having a bias for action and having the awareness of like you don't know what you don't know. And mm-hmm. I think in today's society, like most people have very preconceived notions about things without ever testing them out, right? Like a lot of people hear wholesaling, they're like, oh, it's unethical. I'm like, actually, we help a lot of people. Like, yeah, of course we make money, but we help a lot of people, and we focus on helping people, right? Because if you do the right things, the right things will come. Mm-hmm. But just breaking through those barriers, right? The unknown of, can I do this? Can I not? Right? Like, I've always been able to work my ass off and commit to things, right? But like, I've never done it on my own.
Yeah.
But once I have, it's like, man, I don't want to say I can do anything, but.
How did you decide? You did it with Mike. You weren't even on your own though, right?
Yeah, and that's honestly, I think, have you ever read the book?
And he was a friend from the Marines?
We've always kind of been motivated, but I was in the Marine Corps, and then before that I worked on oil rigs. But
man, friends like that are so great.
Yeah.
And
we're polar opposites too, which is why it's perfect. Like, have you ever read How I Built This by Guy Raz?
I've heard of the podcast, but I have not read. There's a book. I didn't know there was a book.
Outstanding book. Mm-hmm. For me, I think for him too, right? Like I absolutely need a partner. Mm-hmm. Maybe at this stage in the game, like knowing what I know now, how he's made me better, how I've made better, like. I think you could potentially do it on your own, but like to me, there's nothing better than leveraging someone's mind, right? Mm-hmm. Like we're polar opposites. I'm a little more analytical. He's a little more biased for action, and we're able to kind of come together and this, that, and we're both able to, bring clarity to each other's decisions.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's great. And we actually, so we have a third partner, Alex. He's boots on the ground in Kansas City. So me and Mike, we're local to Boston. Again, all right, how do we get our next deal? We join. Are you familiar with Troy Kearns?
Yeah, I am. He's in Kansas City.
Yeah. So we were like, we got to educate ourselves. There's not much out there. And, we stumbled upon his group. It was great in terms of kind of getting started, right? Mm-hmm. Like good education. We tried it locally in Boston, but the market is totally different, like totally fell on our faces, like hired a third party.
I mean, it's way more expensive in Boston than in Kansas City.
Oh yeah, that's where we started, right? And we hired a third party cold calling team, right? Setting up the dialer, getting into Podio, pulling data. Right?
It is harder to move into expensive markets.
We failed.
No
we
question.
failed so bad. And But we got lucky too in the sense of we did come across one through another wholesaler, and we made, I think it was 120,000 on our first flip. So like that was just like
in Boston, right?
yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
That was your first one.
That was the first
And it
one.
was a true flip where you did the construction and everything.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, so Mike has a little bit more
good.
of a construction background. We eventually at first we tried to do it ourselves, and then you realize how much work it is, and then we hired it out. But at the end of the day, we made 120 grand. And it was a great, F yeah, we did it. This is possible. But we also knew that we had no idea what we were doing.
Okay.
So I think,
That's very humble of you, having just made pretty good clip.
yeah, well, I think Boston, it's just way more difficult. Like, right? Like, I have people in Boston now that are still doing it, but they've been doing it for 4 years.
Yeah.
And
Here's how it works. It seems like your cost per deal is higher when the price of the homes are higher. Mm-hmm. And if you're a newbie, that means it also takes like 3 times as much marketing and 3 times as much time. But you do get 3 times as much profit typically at the end as well. So it just is hard to start in an expensive market because it's a bigger startup cost in terms of time and money.
yeah, and again, we had no idea. So then we kind of came just like, you know what? We just did a trip with Troy down in Kansas City, and every other house has a vacant house. And it's like,
So you went remote.
That's where we met Alex. And, we were like, you know what? Let's chase the volume game and get the reps. And, you can only build as high as you can, as you build deep, right? It's like a foundation of the house.
Yeah.
You can only build as high as
You can't shoot a cannon from a canoe.
Yeah, there you go.
You're going to be underwater if you take
like
a big
that.
shot.
Yeah, so May of 23, we started in Kansas City. And it's been 18 months. We've done about 86 deals, or 86 contracts.
Oh man, congratulations.
Yeah, it's been great, but it's like, I just want to do so much more, and it everything just takes time.
And when did you start?
In Kansas City?
Yeah.
In Kansas City, May 23.
Okay. So you've been at it for 2 years. Almost.
Yeah,
and a
so
half.
May will be 18 months. And it's just been 24/7 nonstop, but I love it, right? Like you're creating, you're thinking unique ways. We joined CG, we're meeting other people. I would say now we're very confident in what we're doing in the sense of like, okay, first time you came to CG, like everything looks amazing, right? And now we're, developing confidence in ourselves, and we can do this. I think we're doing it the right way. We're doing minimal marketing. We're still only doing cold calling. We went from hiring a bunch of third-party services to bringing everything in-house.
Why did you do that?
Just because, first you got to just get started. And we had the money. We were able to kind of front the company, and, but then once you do your own due diligence and you're like, oh, wow, I'm paying you 3 times the amount.
Yeah.
You care half as much as I do.
Yeah. Well, I had somebody who hired a cold caller. He had to fire them, and he was like, man, they were doing like 300 calls a day. And I was like, well, were they billing you for 8 hours? And he's like, yeah. I was like, man, dude, have you ever cold called yourself? And he's like, no. And I was like, well, I can call, I do like 160 in like an hour and a half.
Wow.
So I think that it's really important to, for most people, is to do the work first and learn it. So that way when you hire it, you have a understanding of if they're giving you a good deal or not, if they're doing a good job or not, so you can actually manage that task done.
Yeah, I think it's a complex thing, right? Because, and I agree with what you're saying. It's like, also like, if you're able to fail forward fast and you have the means capitals to do it.
Yeah, that's true.
I think, right? But we did kind of what you did. It was what you said. It was like, all right, we really got to learn this, because how can we hire someone else to do something we don't know how to do?
Yeah.
And that's been great. We finally went in-house like after about a year. And now the way we kind of set it up is like similar to the Marine Corps. Every Marine's a rifleman. So like every single employee in our company comes in as a cold caller. prove yourself as a cold caller, even just for a couple months. Prove that you're somewhat intelligent, you want to work, you're loyal, and then we have hire from within.
That's great.
Yeah. So
Man, that makes a lot
awesome.
of sense.
Yeah. So
what are the other positions in your company that they can do besides cold calling if they're good?
LM, cold caller manager is a big one. TC, Dispo.
So lead manager, transaction coordinator.
Dispo manager.
That would be selling the properties.
Yeah.
Yep. Once you have them under contract.
Just, make your Facebook flyers, post to investor lift, talking to buyers, scheduled showings. She does a little bit of marketing, but like getting testimonials, right? Like even building the systems out for that is a lot. So where we're at right now is we finally decided to make the transition to left main. Podio's been great for what it is, but the problem with Podio is, we're still building our systems, right? Like one change in Podio, you have to change it in 7 different apps.
Yeah.
So we're making that transition.
I mean, it doesn't
now.
connect to what are the other apps you're using?
It doesn't connect. So like say if, my seller
You have like a
leads app.
Dispo app. And
Yeah,
and
my
you have
seller leads app, if I want to change something, when to move into the TC app, I have to change it in both. But I also have to change it in the cold callers app.
So it's at different stages of the deal, right? So when it's a lead and you're marketing to it, that's one app. Once they become interested and now they're receiving a contact from you, now it goes in the transaction coordinating app, right?
I think too, in terms of your capabilities in Salesforce, like now that I'm doing the transition, I'm like, oh, well, they are kind of the same. But in terms of, in the beginning, we didn't have a lot of money. I was doing most of Podio, and I was bogging myself down, like Dan Martell says, like, what are you spending your time doing? Podio, it's hard to get a really good, reliable developer. We've gone through 4 or 5, I think, on Salesforce just because it's a Fortune 500 company. I mean, there's developers everywhere.
Yeah.
And then obviously left main, Stephanie, it's like, Stephanie's awesome. So you're jumping into a real estate focused product versus Podio. We had no idea what we were doing, but.
Makes sense.
Yeah, so that's
what
where
is
we're at now.
So you're in the process. You haven't gotten the full transition quite yet.
No, we're in the process. I think we'll be live within a month. And how we're kind of looking at it is moving slow to move fast. Mastering the basics is another Marine Corps concept, like crawl, walk, run. We're in the walking stage on a lot of things, but in terms of expanding and hiring personnel, like we've been building out systems, processes. That's something I'm very good at, I would say. Understanding kind of the second and third level effects of what you're doing. And then we've kind of circled back like, all right, we have our 80% process on everything. Now we're circling back to acquisitions. Like no matter what, we have to be masters at sales.
Yeah.
And that's a big one. So we're really diving in, and the more you dive in, you're like, oh wow. So, and then implementing, sorry to cut you off, right? It's such a big problem in my head. I've been going through every single sales option out there for the last, 30 days, 45 days, every day, kind of building our own kind of manual for it. And now I have to implement it. I have to monitor it. I have to phase it in, right? It's just a lot.
Man, it's funny. We've had a lot of the customer support processes in place since 8 years ago whenever I started hiring that position. And we use that a lot of ways, like use the cold call position at our company where if you're at the top of the pack and we need somebody to help on the marketing team, we'll move them over and now they'll have a new role, right?
Yeah.
We'll backfill in the customer support role because it's such a good way to learn everything, have the basics, frontline communication with customers, et cetera,
100%.
to go into other areas of the company. Recently, though, I noticed our process was kind of breaking, which is surprising as we're 8 years in.
Right.
But I was incentivizing responding quickly to messages, and our average response time was like 1 minute. But I saw some people complaining. They're like, man, it's taking days, to get this solved. And as we had more messages come in because of our growth this past year, it was taking like 2 days to close Yeah, which is a huge pain. And it was because I was incentivizing the team to respond to incoming messages first. They kept getting distracted, and they would leave these cliffhanger chats because I was making them, through my process, message the incoming chats, right? And so then the cliffhangers would just kind of get picked up by someone else because they'd hang out there until the person went on break. And then the same thing would just happen over and over again. So it's pretty crazy, like how that happened, right? Because then we just had all that growth this past year, and that's whenever it started breaking. But it was fine the last 7 years because we just didn't have that as many chats.
So, DealMachine, obviously.
Yep.
Right. But you also, are an investor as well.
I am, yeah.
So how's that built out?
So
I guess honestly, even before, I'm just so interested, right? Like in terms of you managing your
do like
time.
a deal a month on the real estate investing side.
Yeah.
But a DealMachine was put together because I was looking for rundown houses, and there wasn't a tool that seamlessly put together seeing the house, pinning it, looking up who owns it, and getting the mail sent out. And then I saw a house that was actually like being worked on that I knew I had on my list, but I hadn't reached out yet. So I was like, dude, that was my deal, but I didn't reach out yet, So I kind of solved my lack of follow through by creating this app. So that was 8 years ago. And then I did like 9 deals before then. DealMachine was like, oh, this is a bigger opportunity. It really just exploded. And so I stopped doing deals for several years. But then I restarted back again like this past year, and wanting to keep as many as possible. I love to do the BRRRR strategy because then I have a cash flowing rental property that's like good on maintenance for like 10 years. Because everything's brand new about it, so that's really what I like to do.
What's your personality profile?
Oh, it's a good question. I'm not sure.
Yeah, well, I don't really believe too much of them, but I
predictive index, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you know what yours is?
I'm a scholar.
Okay.
And now that I read it, I'm like, oh, that's pretty true.
Yeah.
It's pretty.
I know in the Myers-Briggs, I'm the achiever. I don't think I've taken the PI personally.
Okay. But yeah, that's amazing. So you kind of were just fascinated, and you kind of saw a small problem.
Yes, trying to solve it for myself, really.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wasn't aware of it being an opportunity for others until later.
There's so many things in real estate too. There's so many niches, right? Like the money's in the niche. There's just so many opportunities out there. I think eventually, once we kind of get going, that's something I'd be interested in.
So you and Mike are doing 84 deals.
Me, Mike,
Kansas
and
City.
Alex. Me, Mike, and Alex.
Yeah. Alex lives in Kansas City? Got it. So he's your boots on the ground.
Yeah, he was our acquisitions guy. He is our acquisitions guy, and he's Alex is awesome. He's just like, you meet him and you want to chop it up with him immediately. He's just great at naturally building rapport. He's been great in acquisitions, right? But like, in terms of developing proficiency in anything, and same with us, right? Like unconscious incompetence, right? Like not that he's incompetent, right? But same with all of us. We didn't know what we weren't doing well, right? And then you start to learn, right? And now, right? So where we're at with him, because he's been doing a ton of sales training and stuff, like we're really trying to make him, the best salesperson in Kansas City. So that, the next step is hiring and, training the next guy. So that's where we're at now. It's just a grind, but it's an awesome grind, right? Like it's not.
What personality profile will you look for when you're hiring the next acquisitions person?
I don't know. We haven't gotten that far, to be honest. Alex is a persuader. Mike is, what is Mike? I forget.
Where did you learn about PI?
Just through CG.
Yeah. And how do they encourage you to use it?
Because inherently, right? Like, and I talked to Stephanie about this, right? Like, I don't know if you ever read the book Rocket Fuel, but it talks about visionary integrator, and they talk about LM. You're probably naturally a good LM if you have this kind of personality profile, but I think it's a good way to, right? Because I've known Mike all my life, right? But like until the last 3 years of really being business with him, like you learn the whole another side to someone.
Yeah.
I think a PI is a good way as an owner to kind of assess people's natural tendencies, because it takes a long time. That's why, we've hired people for Dispo, TC, LM positions before. Everyone interviews well, right? There's no real way to know if someone's gonna perform.
Yeah, it's one big thing I learned is you always have to have a test project.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so for us, the test now is cold calling. Like just for starters, right? Like an Egyptian, wage is obviously much lower. Just show to me that you can show up on time and you're good at responding to feedback and you're bought into what we're trying to do. Start there, because you can't achieve that in an interview. But I think your question, PI, we're just really starting to dig into that, where we're going to have our employees kind of take those just to kind of get a better idea.
So at least you understand the person you're communicating with and how they process info.
Yeah, and I think at the same time, people don't. Everyone kind of thinks they're self-aware, but it's really hard to dial it in, right?
Right.
Where now that I'm reading my personality profile, I'm like, oh, I do. Like when Dan Martell, figure out what you love, right? Sometimes I love doing something, but I don't realize that I love it. I'm just in it, right? So being able to identify what I love doing, what I'm good at, how I motivate, right? That's kind of the benefits of it, being able to put words to it.
What would you say has been your worst day as a real estate investor? And I would say for me, the worst day was when I hired 20 people and then our revenue flatlined. And I hired the people that weren't really going to drive revenue. I was mistaken on what was driving revenue in my business.
So what did you, why did you hire, you hired 20 people at once?
Well, I thought we were going to be driven by building more products. So I hired 20 people at once. But really...
when you say building more product, is that...
Yeah, more features in the app.
Okay.
Yep. So you need teams to do that, engineer, you need somebody to prioritize what features should be built next, and somebody to test everything that's being built, make sure there's no bugs, and there's an iterative process where you release those, right? So there's teams that you would build to do more of that. But yeah, that was a really tough time because, like I said, I bought all this stuff people could see, and I hired people, and then I rose all those expenses right whenever our revenue kind of dipped. I'm just curious if there's ever been any big learning moments for you so far that came from maybe a really tough situation.
I think, if you don't mind, I'm just so curious. So what was your first main product?
A DealMachine driving for dollars.
Right.
Yep.
And then, so you identified your revenue generator as that.
Yep.
And you were mistaken thinking you could make revenue elsewhere, or you did, or what was that?
Yeah, so I thought building more features would mean we would sell more products, we'd sell more stuff. But really it made the app difficult to use because we built every feature that everyone ever requested, and so it was Frankenstein. It's kind of tough, to use.
Yeah, mash of the
So that actually hurt the revenue.
What a process, though. I think, what does it say? What does he say of Bruce Lee? He's like, who would you rather fight? The person who's practiced one punch 1,000 times, or the person who's practiced 1,000 punches one time? Right?
Yeah.
That's amazing. It's so good that you got to go through that, right? I think that's kind of what I've learned in life is problems are good, right? And just having the perspective to, understand that only good's going to come from it.
Right.
For us, I think navigating the unknown, I think we had, we're a couple months in business. We had got a good deal from a guy local, and he was like, oh, well, we also got this house in the Ozarks that you can have. And we were like,
have?
Well, in terms of I'll sell it to you.
I'll sell it to you, yeah.
Yeah, and it was an amazing deal. He really liked us, but we had nothing. We knew nothing about the Ozarks. I think everyone from CG tells you know your market, right? But it was at first the best deal. It was almost too good to be true.
You're like, I can't believe this.
It didn't seem that way in the originally. It seemed like it was the best deal. Nothing could go wrong. And it wasn't a great deal. We were able to figure out we made like $7 or $8 grand, but we thought we were going to make like 40 or 50. So just going through that process of like, it looks like such an amazing deal, but we also kind of knew like, all right, we don't know our market. Should we do it? But we took the leap of faith and we tried it. I wouldn't say we failed by any means, but now we're like, all right, stick to your market.
You want to stay in your lane and keep the focus.
But I mean, a good comes from it is, like, okay, now we have to get creative on how to figure this out, right?
Yeah.
Like, do your due diligence. There were septic issues, they have different, permit requirements, just unique permit requirements out there that kind of didn't allow us to do anything. So, just kind of being 2 months in the business.
You mean like you couldn't fix the stuff you needed to fix in order to sell
Yeah,
it?
starting with the docks and then the stone wall, and it was just a lot to take on. And
so you held it longer.
yeah, and in hindsight, in the grand scheme of things, it's like, oh, it's just another notch on the belt. We figured it out, right? But we learned a lot from it. And I mean, yeah, looking back, it was nothing. But during that time, like the emotions that you feel, it's like, damn, we just fucked up. Is this gonna F the business? Is this gonna put us under, right? Like, and it didn't, but you have to go through that and feel that kind of thing to, now that we're doing better, you don't have that. It's like, all right, we'll figure it out. Just be smart.
One question I had for you before we wrap up is, I know that was a flip, and then your first deal in Boston was a flip.
Yeah.
But you talked about doing dispo, so you must be wholesaling a lot in Kansas
we
City.
mostly wholesale.
Why did you decide to switch to wholesale?
I think that was always kind of the idea is master the basics, be the best wholesaler there is. Use that as a means of two things: generating capital, but also giving us access to discounted properties.
Got it. Okay, so
we wholesale mostly. We'll do a little bit of wholesale, very light flips. We just started doing novations, but we're trying to be in and out, move paper, but also we're trying to master the hunt of getting deals. And then
right. So if the true deal is made through finding a good deal, you might as well get rid of it quickly and take the cash so you can get the reps in from finding the deal, mastering the basics, as you said.
Exactly.
Right. So that the wholesaling allows you to get paid well, but also get more reps in.
More reps, and then add. We're just doing cold calling. We're only spending $7,500 to $10,000 a month, right? And then we're building out the acquisitions team, the dispo team, our CRM, and then we can start to pour gasoline on the fire. So then we're all capable. We're all ready to go. And when we pour the gasoline, we're going to be moving. So, but I think wholesaling.
What's the gasoline going to be? Is it going to be
other marketing
TV
methods.
commercials or yeah?
That's what we gotta figure out: efficiency versus effectiveness, right?
Got it.
Like it's mailers sounds amazing, PPC, I've heard different things, TV, but in the meantime, we're narrowing our buy box for rentals, and we have 15 doors now in 18 months, and that's just, we're not even buying a lot, right? We're like, you're buying it and then you're putting a little into it and then you're refining and you pretty much get the property for free and you're still cash flowing. So I don't know. We'll see where it goes.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time, man.
Appreciate it, David.
Really
This has
enjoyed
been
hearing
great.
how, especially the Marines, have brought all these lessons into your business.
100%. Yeah.
Thanks for listening to the Deal Machine Real Estate Investing Podcast. Please leave us a review and follow along wherever you're listening to your podcast.